Have you heard the call to follow Jesus? Today we're talking about who God calls, who Jesus calls into a life of discipleship. Now, I think there's more than one call. A call from God is like an invitation to join Him. There's a call to salvation that He extends to us. We can feel Him drawing us to Himself. He's extending that call, that invitation to be saved, to give your life to Jesus Christ. But that's not the end of it. Then He invites you deeper. He invites you higher. He invites you outward. He invites you into a life of discipleship. You say, well, maybe He called some people to be a disciple, but I don't know if He called me. Well, did He call the rich? Did He call the powerful? Did He call the intellectual? Not primarily. Who did He call? Well, in Matthew chapter 4, we read the story of Jesus going to 4 young men who are fishermen and saying, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." Now, what do we know about these young men on the day that He called them to that apprenticeship into ministry, discipleship? Well, they were already interested. We know from John chapter 1, they had been following Jesus around their area in Galilee as Jesus had been doing ministry in synagogues and other places. They were already interested in Jesus. They hadn't made any commitments to Him, but they were interested. Are you interested in Jesus? Do you want to know more? Or I imagine the fact that you're watching this video tells us that you're interested in knowing more, in doing more, in being more for Jesus. They were ordinary guys. These guys are fishermen. The middle class, working class, ordinary guys, ordinary job. They weren't exceptional. They weren't the rich. They weren't the powerful. They weren't the intellectual. We know that during the first century, it was common for a rabbi. The education system stopped at the age of 15, and then a young man would begin an apprenticeship into a trade, usually with his father. These young men had apprenticed as fishermen. But occasionally there was an exceptional young man, and the rabbi would call him into an apprenticeship with that rabbi, call that young man to be his disciple, his student. Well, nobody had called these guys. No earthly disciple maker, rabbi had called them. But Jesus saw something in them. Outwardly, they were ordinary. Maybe that's you. You say, well, I'm just an ordinary this or that. Well, so were they. Third thing, they were willing. This is a big part. When He called them into a pretty hefty apprenticeship, they left their nets and followed Him. They were willing to go make this commitment. They had a want to. Do you have a real want to, a real desire to? Are you taking steps? Are you doing your part? Are you willing to leave your nets and follow Him? And the last thing I want you to see is maybe you're like, well, you just don't know me. I'm just a nothing. I'm just a nobody. Well, I've got good news for you. God calls the nothing and the nobodies. Let me read to you 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26 and following. Brothers, consider your calling. Not many are wise from a human perspective, not many powerful, not many of noble birth. Instead, God has chosen what is foolish in this world to shame the wise. God has chosen what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God has chosen that which is insignificant, the nothings, and despised, the nobodies, in this world, which is viewed as nothing, to bring to nothing what is viewed as something, so that no man can boast in His presence. Who does God call? Nothings and nobodies. People that realize they're nothing without Him. They can't do it without Him. Think about the people God used throughout history. Noah, we find out he was a drunk. He got drunk after the ark. Abraham, on more than one occasion, he was a liar. He was from a completely pagan background. Moses murdered a man. Rahab, she had been a prostitute. David committed adultery and murder. Mary, she was just a young teenage girl no one ever heard of. Mary Magdalene, she had been demonized. She was probably a young lady who had lived on the wrong side of the tracks and ran with the wrong people doing the wrong things. Peter, when it came crunch time, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Saul, who later became Paul, he was persecuting Christians. But God used all of them. And God wants to use you. But you got to be willing. You got to be willing. Right now, why don't you say to God, God, I am willing to do whatever it takes. I want to follow you with all that I am. God, I am willing. I'm Dave Earley. Thanks for joining us in our daily discipleship. You can follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our goal is just to help you be a disciple so you can make disciples.